This is the Extra Point Podcast from Arizona's family.
Well, the NFL draft is just about upon us. The NFL offseason is underway, so let's get an expert's opinion on both. Chad Brown zooms in from Denver, Colorado. He also spends his time here in the great state of Arizona. And as a kind of NFL insider here, how are you enjoying your time right now? Are you looking at the draft more? What's going on in the offseason? How are you digesting your NFL news these days?
Well, the draft is coming up. We are 8 days away, so that's always an exciting time of the year. Now, I'm in Denver most of the time, so the Broncos don't pick until the third round. It's not a whole lot of draft discussion on my radio show daily with the Broncos only having 5 picks and not drafting until the third round. They gave up so much draft capital to get Sean Payton and Russell Wilson. Now, of course, the Avs and the Nuggets are in the playoffs, so there's a lot to talk about hockey and basketball-wise, but it is a Bronco town. Somehow, without the Broncos making news, it always feels a little bit quiet in Denver.
Well, is Russell Wilson going to be able to throw touchdown passes to Sean Payton and have anybody block for him? What's your just initial thought about this team next year?
It's going to be interesting. Now, when Sean Payton and George Payton, the GM, went out in free agency, they got maybe the best run-blocking guard, the best run-blocking right tackle. They picked up a run-blocking tight end. Let me know if you're picking up a theme here. They picked up a fullback. So Russell Wilson is going to be this is going to be the best opportunity to see what Russell Wilson has, or if he has anything left at all. Last year, Nathaniel Hackett came in and tried to give the keys of the car completely to Russell Wilson. There wasn't a whole lot of structure to the Broncos offense. Sean Payton comes in. He wants to have Russell Wilson. It's often similar to what Russell Wilson had in Seattle, where they play good defense, they run the ball, and set up Russell Wilson for play-action passes. So I don't think it's going to be Russell Wilson throwing the ball 40-plus times a ball game. It's going to be a lot more balanced with Sean Payton. Everyone is expecting Sean Payton to bring in the offense he ran with Drew Brees, but Russell Wilson is not Drew Brees. They are both short quarterbacks, but they possess different skill sets. So it's going to be a lot more balance out here in Denver.
So he doesn't have the keys necessarily. Does Russell Wilson still have his own office in the Broncos facility? Do you know that?
He has Sean Payton has removed Russell Wilson's office, and he has taken away Russell Wilson's team from being in the facility during work hours. I did an internship in Seattle when Russell Wilson was there. And when the Broncos traded and got Russell Wilson, I was warning my viewers and listeners, there's a lot of slippery slope that comes with this guy and the office and the team and the social media and all that stuff. And people were accusing him of being a Russell Wilson hater. And of course, all that stuff came to pop up on the public scrutiny. And with Russell Wilson not playing well, there was a lot of pushback locally here in Denver based on that.
Yeah, and when a guy does that and you're winning, it's just fine. But how would that have gone over, say, in Pittsburgh when you were busy crushing quarterbacks there?
Pittsburgh's no nonsense. Whether it's Bill Cowher or Mike Tomlin, they are a no nonsense organization. Even a guy as talented as Antonio Brown, Mike Tomlin managed him as best as he could. Then once the headache got too big, they even moved that guy out before he became a massive headache for other teams. That thing where players are special and have their own coach in the building, and they have their own strength and conditioning coach who's telling the coach, well, Russell had a lot of reps yesterday in practice, so could you hold back his reps today in practice? None of that would have flown in Pittsburgh.
Did anybody ever count your reps in practice? Bill Cowher?
They usually said there was not enough reps. Chad, you need more work.
Well, I tell you what, this guy Will Anderson from Alabama, I watch him rush the passer. And that's why I was excited to have you on when you became available, because, I remember you coming off the edge, and I watched this guy, and he's kind of the guy that's tabbed for the Cardinals there at 3. Now, if it's to be believed, there won't be a run on quarterbacks. Maybe he's gone early. But when you watch 31 from Alabama and put on the tape, what do you see there from him?
I see a very polished edge defender. He was a top 50 recruit out of high school. Goes to Alabama, is coached maybe by the greatest defensive coach in all of college football, Nick Saban. Found ways to get better almost every single year. He's much bigger than I was coming out of college. He's about 250-plus pounds. I was barely 230 when I showed up to the Pittsburgh Steelers. So bigger, stronger, faster than I was. And coming into the NFL, he already possesses a multifaceted pass rush skill set. I tried to beat people with my speed, and then as time went along in the NFL, I picked up and learned other moves from guys like Kevin Green, my teammate in Pittsburgh. He already comes into the NFL with a full repertoire of pass rush moves.
How high do you pick a pass rusher now? We know running backs typically don't go until later because you put some miles on their tires in 3 years, and it just seems like you don't pay a running back anymore. Where would you draft a pass rusher?
I think pass rusher is a top 5 position. Depending on where you are as a team, the top 5 positions are quarterback, offensive tackle, and pass rusher. Maybe a generational cornerback can slip in there, but that's pretty rare. Those 3 positions usually take up a bulk of the top 5 almost every single season.
And when you look at the draft, I don't know if we have Chad Brown's mock draft out. There's like a million mock. Do you have your own mock draft, by the way?
I do not do a mock draft. I have a standing bet every single year with my big group of friends. If you can predict the top 5 draft picks to the correct teams, just the top 5, and I've had this bet going for almost 10 years, and no one has won that bet yet. So I'm not even sure what would be the point of doing a mock draft when we can't even get the first 5 picks correct.
Where were you mock drafted, by the way?
I was late first round, early second round. I went the 44th pick in the draft pretty early in the second round. There were some teams who were interested in me in the first round, namely the San Francisco 49ers, but a guy who they thought would go earlier in the draft fell to them. I think they had maybe the 24th pick or something like that. So I slid back to the Steelers, and I have no regrets about that at all. As much as I would have loved to have that first round money, to be a Pittsburgh Steeler with Kevin Green and Greg Lloyd and Rod Woodson and Dick LeBeau and Marvin Lewis and all the amazing coaches and players in that locker room, it was the perfect situation for me to go into the NFL.
Oh, the Blitzburg defense. Those were some,
there you go.
Man, you guys crushed quarterbacks. So who do you see that's generational in this year's draft? Do you see any quarterbacks there? Do you think there is that thought to be believed that there might not be a run on quarterbacks right out of the gate?
Generational quarterbacks, I don't believe so. There's not an Andrew Luck. There's not a Trevor Lawrence. There's not a Peyton Manning in this draft. I don't think so. I think Bryce Young is the best and most polished of the group. I actually went to high school with Bryce's mom. She dated our tailback on our football team. So I know he comes from some quite athletic bloodlines. But the size thing is always going to be an issue for Bryce Young. Maybe not playing the quarterback position, but to have the durability that we expect of NFL quarterbacks. Your job is not to be available on Sunday. Your job is to be available every single Sunday. And for a guy of his size, we saw what happened to Tua last year. Tua could not, deal with the massive defensive lineman hitting him and keeping himself safe. And I fear something similar for Bryce Young.
Was there any stories about him meeting the guy that his mom went to high school with growing up in '94? Did you ever get to know him as a kid?
He was supposed to go to my high school, John Muir High School, the Mighty Mighty Mustangs. Unfortunately, John Muir has fallen on hard times, so he went to a different school in the area. I wonder, I'm not sure if he met, that boyfriend of Bryce's mom in high school was Ricky Irvins, who actually ended up playing 7 years in the NFL, was a Rose Bowl MVP for the USC Trojans, played a long time with the Washington Redskins. So although that's not Bryce's dad, his mom certainly had an eye for athletic talents.
Man, what a high school. Yeah, for sure.
Yes.
Okay, so do you think he's the first quarterback off the board? What about the Florida kid? How do you even handicap the position of quarterback anymore when it comes to building around a quarterback? Because you have to have the franchise quarterback to compete, right?
I think you do need a franchise quarterback. Can you get by with the Seattle model of playing great defense and having a powerful running game and ask your quarterback just not to blow the game and complete an occasional play action pass down the field like they did with Russell Wilson early in his career? Seattle certainly had a lot of success with that. But at some point, that model gets blown up because all those defenders, they want big money. So Earl Thomas and Richard Sherman and Cam Chancellor and Michael Bennett and all those guys in Seattle, as those dollars got bigger and bigger and bigger, and as Russell Wilson got nearer to his big payday, Pete Carroll had to make a decision. He decided to go with the quarterback and not the defense, and they haven't had a Super Bowl victory since. I think Pete Carroll's going to try to reinvent that formula again here with Geno Smith. Now they got him under contract for a decent figure. But to your point, yes, I think most time, 90% of the time, maybe even 95% of the time, you are going to be best equipped to make a Super Bowl run if you have a franchise quarterback. Absolutely.
When did a decent figure become $100 million?
The money in the NFL is absolutely bananas. I have had many conversations with Jim and Marsha Brown. You guys had me way too early. If I was a free agent now, I could probably get a $200 million deal. I got a $24 million deal. Jalen Hurts is going to get an average of $51 million bucks a year. I got $24 million over 6 years, which was astronomical money back in my day. So yeah, these guys today, they have an opportunity not just to be wealthy, but to have generational wealth for the next 4 or 5 generations of their family. It's amazing.
All right, we could put together a comeback. I'll get out there and train with you if you want. If you want to, get out on Tempe Town Lake, we'll get out rowing. I mean, I think it's worth it just to try to capture one more of those paychecks.
Well, my buddy Tom Brady played till he was 45. I'm 52, so you would have a lot of work in front of you to get me ready to play NFL football.
All right, so back to the draft. Who is the top guy that you like? Who's kind of the guy you're following? And do you have a sleeper for us?
Okay, so for the top guy, I got to go with Jalen Carter from Georgia. I know there's some off the field concerns, but there's absolutely zero question about his talent. Georgia with the back-to-back national championships, played great defense. He is a guy who plays with tremendous leverage. He can play a penetrating style, more like a Warren Sapp. He can also take care of those offensive linemen and keep the linebackers free. So there's such a varied skill set with him that I think, up until these off-the-field issues cropped up, which I think can be a concern, he was almost considered the best player in the draft. At this point, I think he's still considered the best player, but maybe not the best prospect because of the car accident, the poor showing at his personal workout, being overweight at the combine, things like that. I think he needs to find the right situation, maybe a situation like Seattle, where Pete Carroll is really good at dealing with guys who maybe have some off-the-field issues or quirky personalities from those guys I mentioned earlier, and getting those guys to have their heads on straight and play great football.
Well, when it comes to off-the-field issues inside an NFL locker room, how much can those weigh a team down if not handled properly?
They can weigh it quite a bit because it becomes a distraction. If the off-the-field issues are in the public eye, now everyone in the locker room gets asked about that. Well, what about Chad? What about Chad's availability for Sunday? Is he going to be suspended? How long is he going to be suspended? How do you get by without Chad if he's going to be suspended? He's the best player on your defense. Yeah, and typically, those guys who have those difficult personalities, they like to bring some more guys with them. Every roster I've ever been on, there's always those bottom 5 guys in the roster, maybe not from a skill perspective, but from an attitude perspective. And they are just looking to hitch their wagon to somebody who's got a bad influence. So that's why I think for Jalen Carter, he's got to find the right situation and the right coach who can kind of coach him up past some of this immaturity so he can be the player that his talent deserves, because the skill set is tremendous.
And I do wonder, it's such a sad situation there with the deaths in the car accident, if that has kind of weighed him down, and there is some mental struggles there that he has to get by, and that might be an issue. But moving on, I did want to get your sleeper. Is there anybody, in the third round, any running backs out there, anybody that you're kind of thinking, oh man, if this guy gets drafted, if he ends up with X team, this is going to be the steal of the draft?
I got to go linebacker because, I played linebacker, and I called a number of this guy's games at Wisconsin. Nick Herbig, he's a bit undersized, 6'2", barely 230. He played the edge at Wisconsin, but he's obviously too small to play the edge in the NFL. But he's got a tremendous skill set where he can play on the ball as an edge guy. He can play off the ball. He can cover well. He's got a number of passes broken up. He's got good coverage skills. In some ways, he reminds me of me coming out of college. My first 2 years at Colorado, I was an inside linebacker. My last 2 years, I was an outside linebacker. I go to Pittsburgh. They signed Kevin Green a couple of days before the draft. So they're still scouting me, looking at me first initially as an outside linebacker, but they get Kevin Green. So they say, well, can you play inside linebacker? And I tell Coach Cowher, I can punt if you want me to. I'll do whatever you want me to do. So this guy reminds me of me coming out of college with that very varied skill sets, where it's going to be the right team that's either going to find the perfect position for him or the right team and a defensive coordinator who's going to be able to take advantage of his versatility and use him as a Swiss Army knife.
Awesome. All right, so Arizona Cardinals, you spent some time in Arizona. What's the perception right now? Buda Baker's asking for a trade. Michael Bidwell's under the microscope. It's kind of depressing. We're hoping these new uniforms tomorrow. We're hoping they're good, because if they're not good, that's just going to be oh man. What's the national perception right now of the Cardinals?
Wow, the Cardinals are I won't call them quite a dumpster fire, but it's a very smelly dumpster over there in Arizona. The ownership issue. You got the former GM talking about he's going to be exposed for all his lies. There's all the doubts about Kyler Murray that existed before the knee injury. Now there's the doubts about recovering from the injury, and plus the continued doubts about his quarterback playing skill set. And then there's just such a deep list of needs for this team: defensive end, edge, running back, tight end, guard, center, cornerback, wide receiver. The Cardinals can pick almost anybody in the draft, and that guy would have an opportunity to fill a need for them. It's not just a small, isolated number of positions. The entire roster needs upgrading.
So do you play Kyler Murray at all next year, or do you have him sit out after the knee injury and try to stockpile back-to-back top 5 picks?
Ooh, gosh, I'm not sure who the quarterback who would be the best player. So who would you be tanking for? There's always those slogans.
Or do you go Caleb Williams? I mean, there's a lot. I mean, I don't know that you can trade. Do you think you can trade Kyler Murray in his contract right now?
I don't think so. As desperate of a quarterback league as there is, a top of the market contract for a player who is yet to be proven he can be consistently available and play at a consistent high level, and also play at a level in the biggest games. Kyler Murray tends to shrink up in the biggest games. So I'm not sure if there's going to be a club that'd be willing to do that. I think you hopefully get Kyler Murray healthy at some point during the season. You bring him back when he's completely healthy, so you can ensure not any further injury. But they've got to find a way just to build up a solid roster of players around him. They don't need to make any big splashy moves. They just need to build up some good football players. I mean, the old adage has always been more games are lost than are won. So if you can get some good football players, they don't have to be 9s out of 10s. They can be 7s. And you can win with 7s. As long as those 7s are consistent and they don't ever play bad football. Eliminate the bad football, bring in some solid players, and then begin to build off of that.
Buda Baker, DeAndre Hopkins, which one do you think will be traded first from the Arizona Cardinals? Or is there a chance that both guys would still be on the roster on opening day?
I don't think so. With the draft coming up and the league becoming more and more trade friendly, for the Cardinals to kind of press the reset button, I think they try to find ways to move both those guys. Buda Baker is obviously one of the better safeties in the league, a great in the box guy. I do have concerns about the long-term durability to play the style that he plays at his, smaller size. It gives me some concerns. And for DeAndre Hopkins, missing 6 games last year with the suspension, and at what is he, 30 plus, 31, 32? How old is he?
31, about to be 32. Yeah.
There we go. Getting on a little bit long in tooth for an NFL player, particularly at a position that requires, such dynamic footwork and speed and things like that. I think there may be the right trade partner. He's going to have to bring his salary number down to make that happen.
Is there another trade you're watching in the NFL come draft night? What do you think is going to be the biggest story come draft night?
Gosh, again, we talked earlier about the impossibility of just picking the first 5 picks in the draft. So it's almost impossible to figure out what some of these teams are going to do. But I think as NFL fans, we need to get used to trades becoming a big part of the draft weekend. Teams, I think, are just far more comfortable making moves than they ever once were. And for an aggressive general manager who's either trying to shed some high contracts so we can kind of rebuild this roster, as I talked about for Arizona, or it's a team that feels as if we are just the right veteran presence away, this may be the year where we see the most trades of all time.
What was the emotions like? What were they like when you got the call? Was it tears? Was it the moment that everybody would think that the life-changing moment that you're going to the NFL?
It's a combination of, oh my goodness, I can't believe this has happened. The humbleness of the moment, because at least for me, I certainly realized I did not get to that moment by myself. when you play Pop Warner football and junior high and high school football, your mom's driving you to practice, picking you up from practice. She's washing your uniform, all the time. My dad spent with me in the yard when I was playing Pop Warner football. So all the help that I got along the way, my high school football coach, all that flashes in your mind. And then I freaked out. It's like, okay, this is not amateur anymore. I'm going to be a professional football player. I'm going to the Pittsburgh Steelers, one of the most iconic franchises in all the sport. And I've mentioned some of those guys like Kevin Green and Rod Woodson and Greg Lloyd, grown men who were, trained assassins in some way. When I was just an undersized kid hoping to make the roster. So a little bit of fear with that humbleness and with that celebratory feeling as well.
What was that first conversation with Bill Cowher like?
Bill Cowher's, he can be so intense. He's got the Bill Cowher hand motion like he's Spock on Star Trek. He's a very, very, very close talker. He likes to get right up in your face. So I'm not even sure if I remember the words he said, but I certainly knew that there was a presence to Bill Cowher that was unmistakable. And I was going to have to figure out a way to be able to hear what he was saying when he was this close to my face.
Well, hey, I know you're busy covering other sports up there in Denver. That's a gym right there. We're going to put that in the Extra Point Hall of Fame. What's the feeling on the Nuggets up there? Are we going to see Nuggets Suns? How do you feel about the Suns as well?
Well, obviously the addition of KD gives them a great chance. It's going to be a great series going back and forth with the Clippers. I don't think Kawhi can put up 38 like he did in the first game every single night. So it's going to be a back and forth thing there. But I expect the Suns to win that one. And then here in Denver, the Timberwolves, I don't think have enough. Will they play better than they played in game one? The Nuggets beat them by 29 points. I expect the Timberwolves to be much better. Karl Anthony Towns was off with his shot all night. They'll bring better energy. They'll bring better shooting. But in the end, the Nuggets will win the series.
Nuggets, Suns, if they go head-to-head, who do you like?
Ooh, there's been some doubts about the Nuggets because of the way they kind of turned it down the last month of the season. They had the division kind of sewed up, so they turned it down. The question was, could they flip that switch back on? Well, at least for game one, they did. We'll see if they're able to do that, all series long against the Timberwolves. And then can they do it against the Suns? Because there's still some doubts about this team. We know the Joker is a great player, but is Michael Porter Jr. just kind of good, or is he actually great? Jamal Murray, can he step up? He had a great bubble playoff run 2 years ago, but we need to see him do it consistently here in this playoff run, excuse me, for the Nuggets to have a chance.
Are we more likely to see you at an NBA playoff game, or do you throw on the hockey jersey and go out there and try to hoist the Stanley Cup with the Avalanche?
Oh, it's absolutely basketball for me. With the Avs playoff run last year, I certainly raised my hockey knowledge and my hockey appreciation. But I grew up in Southern California playing basketball. So the sport is just more natural to me than hockey. I enjoy the frantic pace of hockey. And there's lots to be said for the physicality of it as well. But the NBA, the athleticism, there's something about it that just speaks to my soul.
Well, there's the comeback there in professional basketball. So maybe we'll get you back in shape there. Come on down to Arizona and we'll work on that. Hey, where can we find you online, and where can we see your next hot take here on social media?
Wow. Okay. Well, I'm actually taking a social media break. So you can find me at Chad Brown 94 on Twitter. It's been a bit since I've posted it, maybe a week or so. So I'm not too long into this break.
Smart man.
I'll pick it up probably in a couple of weeks if the Nuggets are near the finals or the Avs are going to play in the Stanley Cup Finals. I'll be forced to do it. But I thought, you know what? Let me just get away from this for a bit here and separate and kind of reset my mind where I'm not looking at my phone every 5 minutes.
That's a veteran move right there. So, hey, we appreciate your time. And next time you're in Phoenix, stop on by Arizona's Family. The seat will always be open for you to talk sports.
Awesome, man. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
The Extra Point Podcast is a production of 3TV, CBS5 at azfamily.com in Phoenix, Arizona.